It was March 1959, and the Arizona desert was brutally hot. Old Tucson Studios had been transformed into a dusty western town for the filming of Rio Bravo, Howard Hawks' highly anticipated western starring John Wayne, Dean Martin, and young Ricky Nelson. Dean Martin was there playing Dude, a deputy struggling with alcoholism, the role that would prove Dean was more than just a singer. He'd been on set for 6 weeks, working harder than he'd ever worked, determined to show Hollywood he could act. The shoot was going well. Dean and Wayne had developed an easy friendship. The crew loved working with them. Everything was on schedule, on budget. Until March 18th. They were filming a chase sequence. A group of stuntmen were supposed to ride horses at full gallop through the main street, firing rifles, creating the chaos of a Western shootout. It was a routine stunt, the kind these professionals had done hundreds of times. But something went wrong. One of the horses stumbled. Its rider, a 44-year-old stuntman named Carl Mitchell, was thrown violently to the ground. He landed hard, rolled several times in the dust, and didn't get up. The set medic rushed over. Within minutes, an ambulance was called. But Old Tucson was remote. The nearest hospital was 45 minutes away. They had a medical tent on set for minor injuries, so Carl was carried there while they waited for the ambulance. Dean was in the middle of a scene with Wayne when he heard the commotion. He saw the stuntmen gathered around, saw the worried looks, saw Carl being carried away on a stretcher. "Cut!" Hawks yelled. "Everyone take 5. Let's make sure a man is okay." Dean immediately headed toward the medical tent. Wayne followed. Inside, the set doctor was examining Carl. The news wasn't good. The fall had caused severe internal injuries. The doctor shook his head gravely at Hawks, who'd just arrived. "We need to get him to a hospital," the doctor said quietly. "But I have to be honest, with injuries this severe, I don't know if he'll make it." Carl was conscious but in terrible pain. His face was pale, sweat pouring down his temples. Dean stood in the entrance of the tent, watching, feeling helpless. He'd never met Carl personally, but he knew the man by sight, one of the reliable stunt guys, always professional, always prepared. The ambulance arrived. As they were loading Carl onto the stretcher to transport him, Dean heard the assistant director talking to Hawks. "We've contacted everyone on Carl's emergency card. There's no family. His parents are dead. No wife, no kids. His emergency contact is his landlord." Dean felt something twist in his chest. This man was dying, and he was going to die alone. No one waiting at the hospital. No one to hold his hand. No one to tell him it would be okay, even if it wouldn't be. The ambulance left. Hawks called everyone back to set. "All right, let's keep moving. We've got a schedule to keep." Dean didn't move. He stood there, watching the dust from the ambulance disappear down the road. Wayne noticed. "Dino, you're okay?" "He doesn't have anyone," Dean said quietly. "Did you hear that? No family. Nobody." "That's rough," Wayne agreed. "But the best thing we can do for him is finish this picture. These stunt guys, they take pride in the work. He'd want us to keep going." Dean nodded, but something didn't feel right. They went back to filming, but Dean couldn't concentrate. Every line felt hollow. Every movement felt wrong. All he could think about was Carl Mitchell, alone in a hospital room, facing death with no one on his side. After an hour of blown takes, Hawks finally called it. "Dean, what's going on? You're not here." "I can't do this. I can't stand here pretending to shoot bad guys while Carl is dying alone." Hawks sighed. "Dean, I understand you're upset. We all are. But we have a movie to make. Carl knew the risks of this job. We all do." "He doesn't have anyone," Dean repeated. "When was the last time you were in a hospital, Howard? When was the last time you were scared and hurt and facing the end? Would you want to do that alone?"
"Of course not, but then I can't be here." Dean started walking toward his trailer. Hawk's face turned red. "Dean, if you walk off this set, you're in breach of contract. That's serious. We're talking about potentially millions of dollars." Dean stopped, turned around. Then sue me. I don't care. That man doesn't have anyone, and I'm not going to let him die alone. The set went silent. Crew members stopped what they were doing. Everyone was watching this confrontation between the director and his star. Wayne stepped forward. "Howard, let him go." Hawks turned to Wayne, surprised. "Duke, we can't afford—" "Let him go," Wayne repeated, his voice firm. "He's doing the right thing." Hawks looked between Dean and Wayne, then at the crew watching him. Finally, he threw up his hands. "Fine, go. But we're shutting down production until you come back. Every day we're not filming costs us $50,000. That's on you." Dean nodded. "I understand." Then he got in his car and drove to the hospital. When Dean arrived, he found Carl in a small room, hooked up to various machines, breathing oxygen through a mask. A nurse was checking his vitals. Carl's eyes were closed. "Are you family?" the nurse asked. "I'm a friend," Dean said. "How is he?" The nurse's expression said everything. "He's comfortable. We're managing his pain, but the internal bleeding, there's nothing more we can do. It's just a matter of time now." "How much time?" "Hours, maybe a day. It's hard to say." Dean pulled a chair next to Carl's bed and sat down. "Then I'll stay." "Visiting hours end at 8, the nurse said gently. "I'm not visiting. I'm staying. If you need to call security, go ahead, but I'm not leaving him alone." The nurse looked at Dean for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll bring you some coffee." Carl opened his eyes a few hours later. He looked confused, trying to figure out where he was, what had happened. Then his eyes focused on Dean, sitting in the chair beside him. "Mr. Martin?" Carl's voice was weak, scratchy. "What are you doing here?" "Call me Dean, and I'm here because nobody should be alone right now." "But the movie, you're supposed to be filming." "The movie can wait. You can't." Carl's eyes filled with tears. "You don't even know me." "I know enough. I know you're one of the guys who makes us actors look good. I know you take risks so we don't have to. I know you're hurting and scared, and I know you don't deserve to go through this alone." Carl tried to speak but couldn't. Dean reached over and took his hand. "You don't have to say anything. I'm just going to sit here with you, okay? And if you want to talk, we'll talk. If you want to sleep, I'll be here when you wake up." For the next 2 days, Dean Martin didn't leave that hospital room. He sat in that chair, holding Carl's hand, talking to him when he was awake, watching over him when he slept. Dean told Carl stories about the Rat Pack, about Vegas, about all the crazy things he and Frank and Sammy had done over the years. When Carl was in too much pain to talk, Dean would sing to him, quietly, gently, songs that Carl remembered from his childhood. Back at the set, production had shut down. The crew sat around, waiting. Some were frustrated about the lost work, but most understood. Wayne spent those 2 days visiting the hospital, checking on Dean, making sure he was okay. "You should go back," Dean told Wayne during one visit. "There's no reason for everyone to wait."
Wayne shook his head. "Hawks shut down production. Says we're not filming without you. But between you and me, Dino, I think he gets it now. He's been making calls, checking on Carl. Even he's starting to understand that some things matter more than schedules." On the evening of the second day, Carl took a turn for the worse. The nurse came in, checked his vitals, and gave Dean a look that said it wouldn't be long. Dean leaned close to Carl, still holding his hand. "Hey, Carl, I'm right here. You're not alone. You hear me? You're not alone." Carl opened his eyes one last time. He looked at Dean, squeezed his hand weakly, and whispered, "Thank you." Then he closed his eyes and was gone. Dean sat there for a long time, still holding Carl's hand, tears running down his face. A nurse finally came in and gently touched Dean's shoulder. "Mr. Martin, he's at peace now. You gave him a beautiful gift." Dean stood up, wiped his eyes, and looked down at Carl one last time. "No," he said quietly. "He gave me one. He reminded me what matters." The next morning, Dean returned to the set. The crew applauded when he arrived. Not the polite applause actors get, but genuine, heartfelt appreciation. They'd heard what Dean had done. Word had spread through the tight-knit community of Hollywood stunt performers. Dean Martin had stopped a movie, risked a breach of contract, and sat with a dying man for 2 days because nobody should die alone. Hawks approached Dean, looking uncomfortable. "Dean, I owe you an apology. I was wrong. What you did for Carl," his voice broke, "that took real courage. More courage than anything we're pretending to do in this movie." Dean nodded. "Let's just get back to work, Howard, for Carl." They did, but something had changed on that set. The atmosphere was different. People worked harder, treated each other better. The stunt coordinators implemented new safety protocols. Hawks made sure every stunt performer had multiple emergency contacts on file. And if anyone didn't have family, the production would assign someone to be there if anything went wrong. John Wayne pulled Dean aside during lunch break that day. "Dino, I've worked with hundreds of actors. I've worked with war heroes. I've seen a lot of brave men do a lot of brave things. But what you did these past 2 days, that's the bravest thing I've ever seen." "Come on, Duke. I just sat in a chair." "No," Wayne said firmly. "You sacrificed your career, your reputation, maybe millions of dollars to make sure a man didn't die alone. You don't know what kind of message that sent. Every stunt guy in Hollywood is going to hear about this. Every person who's ever felt invisible or unimportant is going to hear about this. You showed everyone that no life is too small to matter. That's not just bravery, Dino. That's heroism." Dean shook his head, embarrassed. "I just did what anyone would." "That's where you're wrong," Wayne replied. "Most people wouldn't. Most people would have finished their scene, said a prayer, maybe sent flowers to the funeral. You stopped everything. You sat with him. You held his hand. You sang to him. You made sure his last moments on this earth were filled with kindness. That's not what anyone would do. That's what a hero does." When Rio Bravo was released later that year, critics praised Dean's performance as Dude. They said he'd proven himself as a serious actor. But Dean never forgot that the real story of Rio Bravo wasn't on the screen. It was in that hospital room, in those 48 hours he spent with Carl Mitchell. Years later, when Dean was asked about his proudest moment in Hollywood, people expected him to talk about his hit records, his successful TV show, or his acclaimed acting roles. Instead, Dean talked about Carl. "I've made a lot of movies," Dean said. "I've sung a lot of songs. But the thing I'm most proud of? Sitting with a man who was dying and making sure he wasn't alone. Everything else I've done, the entertainment, the performances, that was for the audience. But sitting with Carl, that was just for him. And that mattered more than anything else I'll ever do."
Carl Mitchell's funeral was small. A few stunt performers attended, some crew members from Rio Bravo, and Dean Martin. Dean paid for the funeral himself. He also established a fund within the Stuntmen's Association to help stunt performers and their families in times of crisis. The Carl Mitchell Memorial Fund still exists today, helping stunt professionals when they're hurt or in need. John Wayne spoke about Dean's actions for the rest of his life. In his final interviews before his death in 1979, Wayne was asked who the real heroes of Hollywood were. He always mentioned Dean Martin and what he'd done on the Rio Bravo set. "Hollywood is full of people pretending to be brave," Wayne said in his last interview. "But Dean Martin showed real courage when it mattered. He chose compassion over career. He chose kindness over keeping to a schedule. And he reminded all of us that the most important thing we can do is be there for each other. That's heroism." The story of what Dean did spread throughout Hollywood, though Dean never talked about it publicly. He considered it private, personal. But the people who were there, the crew, the cast, the hospital staff, they never forgot, and they told the story to others. Film sets became safer. Stunt coordinators became more careful. Production companies started ensuring that every person on set had someone who would be there for them in an emergency. Dean Martin's 48-hour vigil with a dying stuntman had changed how Hollywood treated its most vulnerable workers.
Dean Martin died on Christmas Day, 1995. At his funeral, several elderly men attended who most people didn't recognize. They were stunt performers who'd worked in Hollywood during the 50s and 60s. They came to pay their respects to the man who'd shown them and the entire industry that every life matters, no matter how small the role. One of them, a retired stunt coordinator named Jack Williams, spoke to a reporter after the funeral. "What Dean did for Carl Mitchell changed everything for us. Before that, we were expendable. We were the guys who took the hits so the stars wouldn't have to. Nobody cared much if we got hurt. But after Dean stopped that movie, after he sat with Carl, things changed. People started seeing us as human beings, not just stunt dummies." Dean Martin saved more than Carl's dignity that day. He saved all of ours. The reporter asked what Williams remembered most about Dean. "I remember that he never acted like he'd done anything special," Williams said. "He just shrugged it off, like sitting with a dying man for 2 days was the most natural thing in the world. Like of course you'd stop a multi-million-dollar movie to make sure someone didn't die alone. That was Dean. He never understood how rare that kind of compassion is. He just thought it was what you were supposed to do." Today, when film students study Rio Bravo, they analyze the cinematography, the performances, the direction. But the real lesson of Rio Bravo wasn't captured on film. It happened in a hospital room between a famous actor and a dying stuntman nobody knew. It was the lesson that fame means nothing if you don't use it to help others, that schedules and budgets and contracts are just numbers, but compassion is what makes us human. That the bravest thing you can do isn't on a movie screen, it's sitting with someone in pain and telling them they matter. Dean Martin taught that lesson not with words or performances, but with 48 hours of simple presence. And in doing so, he became the kind of hero that Hollywood usually only pretends to create, a real one. If this story of compassion and humanity moved you, please subscribe and hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that kindness is the bravest thing we can choose. Let us know in the comments, have you ever stopped everything to be there for someone? We'll see you in the next video with more incredible true stories of courage and heart.